Okay, that should be recording.
Fair.
Um, if we could hopefully get some cameras on, a little bit of engagement, so Fernie's not talking to a void here. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna end up asking for engagement too, from y'all. Like, there's a discussion portion of this presentation, so don't be scared. I encourage cooperation from y'all just because it's fun, and that is, I think, the best way that we learn. So yeah, I'm gonna get started. Let me try to share my screen. This is on my iPad, so I don't know if I'm doing this right. Can y'all see this?
I can see it.
Okay, fierce. Fierce. All right. Hi, y'all. My why did it do that? Why is it doing that? Okay. Okay. Hi, y'all. My name is Fernando. I am a recent graduate from the University of Texas at Austin. I did speech in high school, low key middle school, but we don't talk about that. I did speech in high school and college. I specialize in inter, but I also did platform speeches. And today I've been invited to talk to y'all about setting and building environment. So this is the presentation I have prepared for y'all. It's called Setting is Everything, How to Build Environment in Interp, created and presented by me, Fernando Cereceres. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about what we're gonna talk about today. We're gonna talk about what is environment and why do we need it. We're going to talk about blocking versus environment because there's a key difference that we need to establish before we get into anything else. We're going to talk about what it looks like. We're going to watch a video and we're going to have a discussion about it. And we're going to talk about how to create and perform environment, then some questions, and some resources. I don't have the resources on deck with me right now. Like, they're all PDF files. So, Rodrigo, I'll talk to you like after about like if we can email those to people. I'll just like text Dara. But yeah.
Great.
Okay, cool. Let's start off with some definitions of environment. So, the Oxford Dictionary says that environment is the setting or conditions in which a particular activity is carried on. The Modern Actor, which is like a column for like aspiring actors and such, says that environment is the physical location that a scene takes place. I cut out a little bit of like the middle, and then goes on to say environment also covers proxemics, which is our relationship to space in relation to other people. So, how we distance ourselves from other people. And space, the areas of social space include intimate space, personal space, social space, and formal space. Now, I'm not going to get too in depth on these four types of space, but I want to kind of cover them really quickly just so that we really start to rethink the ways and like transform the ways that we think about space, right? Usually in speech, when we think about space, we think about like, oh, like if I am doing an OO, space is how I walk from this point to my next point. Or like when we think about space and like POI, it's like, oh, this is how I'm going to do my blocking. And maybe like if I'm going to walk around the room, right? I want us to think about space as like an acting choice, right? So, like when we think about intimate space, that is the space between you and another person, or maybe a small group of people, right? I always like to think of intimacy and intimate space as the space that you get to choose who sees it. It's intimate, right? Not everyone is allowed into this space. It's only the special people who are allowed in, right? So I usually like to think of my best friends. These are people who like I create intimate spaces with, right? The people who I tell like my deepest darkest secrets to and like have like special moments with them, right? It's not just everyone. Personal space is the space that you have to yourself. So if someone like keeps like pushing you or touching you without your consent, right? Like that is your personal space, right? It's the relationship that you have to yourself. I also like to think of personal space as maybe like if someone calls you by a nickname that like only a personal friend can call you and they're not your personal friend, that's personal space, right? Like it's the space that you carve out for yourself, right? The things that are important to you and that you maintain for yourself. Social space is like the opposite of intimate space. It's like where you do not control who is able to see you in that space, right? So it's anywhere public. It's could be you walking down the street. It could be you at a social function, at a party, at the movies, at a coffee shop, right? Anywhere where like anyone can really have like eyes on you, that is social space. And then formal space is a type of social space that is, well, formal, right? So, like a job, for instance, or like a really special luncheon where like you have to network with people, right? These are formal spaces where you don't control who sees you in the space, but you're extra conscious of how you move throughout that space because you want people to perceive you and you want people to perceive you well in that space. All of this is to say that like we should start thinking about for this presentation and also throughout your inter career, you should start thinking about like the relationship that space has on your acting choices, right? We will move differently within intimate spaces than informal spaces, which is to say, you're going to move way differently when you're by yourself in your room than when you're at work, right? Let that motivate a lot of the decisions that you make in interp and your pieces. So you might be listening to me yap right now and be like, this doesn't matter, right? Like, why do we need environment? Because like it's not theater, right? Interp isn't theater. Interp doesn't use props or stage design like theater does. So like, why does environment even matter, right? To that, I say this. Environment helps bring the scene come to life, specifically because the challenge is that we don't have props or stage design like in theater. Environment exists to assist actors in their motivations and character choices and helps audiences better understand the story. Thus, even if you're performing an interp where physical props and staging are prohibited, using blocking and pantomime choices will help you create a richer, more enthralling story. Interp is all about you telling your story, but specifically you telling your story for the audience, right? Interp is, we like to call it like a transaction. Like there needs to be some give and take there, right? You need to acknowledge that the audience is there. And so, in order to make the story more clear, in order to make the story more enriching, you got to have a little bit of environment in there so that your audience is able to follow you along and not only follow you along, but also really feel a connection to these characters and want to see what happens next. So by the end of the round, they're like, whoa, this changed me, right? So let's talk about blocking choices versus environment. Let's talk about blocking versus environment. There is a fundamental difference between blocking choices and setting up an environment. Blocking choices are standalone, okay? While environments are a series of blocking choices and engagements with your space that create a scene. So, for instance, opening a book is a blocking choice, right? Like if I'm doing like my little DI and I start off by opening a book, that's a blocking choice, right? It doesn't really tell us where we are. But if I start off my DI by looking at a bookshelf and I'm looking for a book and I finally found it, I pick it out, I open it, maybe I go up to like a register and I give them the book, I give them my card to check out. I really want someone to tell me really quick, like, based off of that series of blocking choices, where do you think I am?
In a library or at some bookstore.
Exactly.
Library.
Well, the answer is like on the slide. I just realized, but yeah, you're right. Like, you're those series of blocking choices inform the audience that we are in a library or a bookstore, right? I think where most students really like get confused about blocking an environment is the difference between them, right? I think this really muddles like the process for them, and this is where they get lost in a lot of like choices where they're like, "Oh, I keep getting these ballots where they're telling me that they don't understand where I am or who I'm talking to, or they don't really understand the scene, but I'm making all these blocking choices. Like, how do they not understand?" I think that's where students get tripped up a lot. Is you're doing a lot of blocking choices, which is great, but they need to all connect and be a little bit more cohesive and they need to interact with each other so that you can build an environment. A single piece of blocking is not enough, sorry to say, but a single piece of blocking is not enough to inform the audience on your overall environment. All of your blocking choices should connect back to your script character and setting. And this is where we're going to try to show an example of this to better assist y'all. So, what does environment look like in an interpret? Let's watch. We're going to watch Taylor Turner's 2018 NSDA fourth place performance of The Kink in My Hair by Trey Anthony. Let me, boom. And we're going to watch a real quick Chick-fil-A commercial, I guess.
Hi, this is Jamor, and a little thing that I love about the Chick-fil-A spicy honey pepper pimento chicken sandwich is that extra umph. You're going to get that sweetness of the honey, and then you're going to get the heat from the spicy filet. The pair.
Yeah, we can.
Event.
Oh, you can hear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And all the sister events leading up to it, especially those.
Let the doors be closed.
Our final contestant in dramatic interpretation, 337, The Kink in My Hair.
So you want me to talk to you? Explain what's going on? Well, forget it. I don't have time today. Okay, being a hairdresser is not an easy thing. I'm always working. People coming in here talking, oh, now the lab. Well, I want this style, this wash, this cut, this color, but don't they see I am busy? And then there's the women who come in here looking like they were run over by a truck. Oh, no. And expect me to make them look like they're Janet Jackson. And I say, ladies, I'm a hairdresser, not a magician. Well, I get to know everybody's business. Not that I'm nosy or anything. If they don't tell you, the hell will. See if you want to get to know a woman, a black woman, that is. Touch her hair. Touch her hair. Well, why do you think it's kinky? Well, it got all our sexual fantasies. Don't believe me? Well, let me tell you, see, my mother was a hairdresser. My mother's mother was a hairdresser, and my granny used to be a hairdresser. Our hair carries our journey, because that's where we carry all our hopes and dreams and hurts and disappointments. Well, they all in our hair. Okay, fine, I'll talk to y'all.
Okay, I just wanted to show y'all the teaser on that, because a 10-minute performance for like a 1-hour presentation takes up a lot of time. But yeah, okay, let's discuss this a little bit. This is where I'm gonna ask y'all to like maybe just like turn y'all's mic on. I can't really see y'all right now because I'm screen sharing. So like just turn on your mic, contribute if you think you got an answer. There are no wrong answers. This is a discussion. But let's talk about what we just saw, right? Where do y'all think the story took place?
In some type of beauty salon.
Right, in a beauty salon, right? I kind of want to know, who said that?
Kobe.
Okay, Kobe, I want you to answer this next question for me. You said it took place in a beauty salon. What kind of blocking choices did the performer do to indicate where they were in the story, that like they were in a beauty salon?
So it was this one part where she was putting her hands up, kind of like squirting some type of shampoo or conditioner in her hand, and kind of moving her hands in front, showing that she's kind of messing with somebody's hair.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Anyone else have like any other like blocking choices that she did that like really told you like, oh, we're in a salon right now? No? All right, cool. I want someone else to tell me, how did the performer Taylor engage with the space? And how did it affect the way that she moved and blocked the piece?
I feel like she took up the entirety of her environment. Like she moved everywhere, and you could see that like she wasn't like staying to like one designated zone. She was like moving halfway across the stage to another part to wash her hands, and the other part to like work on the customer.
Yeah. Like she had a designated spot where it's like the sink and like the hand soap, and then she had another designated spot where it's like uh where she washes like her client's hair, where she has the shampoo and conditioner. Like they were separated, right? Like that's how she
Yeah.
made really good use of the space. And it meant that like she was gonna go wash her hands, she's gonna go to the other part of the stage, she's gonna go wash the girl's hair, she's gonna go to the other part of the stage, right?
Right.
Anyone else have something else that they thought was cool about the way that Taylor engaged with the space?
Um, I was just gonna say that because she used her entire stage, um, it allowed her to like not be kind of stuck in her spot because she had the like washer on one side and like the sink on the other side, so it let her to still have space to roam around without kind of like walking through walls and messing up where everything was like set up.
Yeah. It's cool that you bring that up where you're like, she's not stuck in one space. If like on the Texas Speech team, we usually say that like if someone has like a DI where like they don't have an environment and they're just like there like giving the story, we call it a park and bark. Like you're just there talking, right? Like we need more, right? And you're right, like that is what she did. Like she used the entirety of her space. It didn't confine her to like just one position to like just deliver lines. All right. This question is open to anyone as well. Was there anything that left you confused about the environment or the blocking choices? All right, that's a good thing. Like that, if no one was confused by anything, that's a good thing. It means that she was really good at setting up the environment. But sometimes, like a lot of the blocking choices that we make, or like some decisions that we make to set up environment, can be confusing, and that's not a bad thing. Like we can go back and fix that, right? Um, but it's important to kind of think about like if we're looking at pieces to analyze their blocking choices and their setup of environment, it's also really important to ask ourselves if we're confused by anything, so that way we can apply it to our own performances and be like, okay, I've been confused by this type of blocking before. Maybe I shouldn't do that because I wouldn't be able to emulate that, right? Um, I encourage y'all to like maybe take like a screenshot of this page or something like that, or make like your own questions, just so that y'all can watch like other NSDA performances and ask yourselves how each speaker engages with the space and what unique blocking choices do they do that really help you understand where they are, who they're talking to, what they're doing. And as we're going to get into like further on within this presentation, like why they're making those choices and how it contributes to their acting. And also, like, this is important for every intern, not just DI. It's also for duo, HI, POI, etc. All right, let's talk about how we actually get into creating environment. Most people believe that the work towards creating an environment is purely performance based, but they're wrong. Blocking an environment work begins at the script. Start by reading your script and asking yourself questions like, where is my character? Why are they there? What is physically surrounding my character in the setting? What does my character want? And how does the environment affect how they get it, right? This is like a little bit of like the preliminary questions that a lot of actors ask themselves on getting to understand their character better. Just to give a little bit in case someone isn't aware of this, right? Like in these are usually like theater things, but a lot of these beliefs have migrated over into interp. In theater, there's always like a motivation for why this certain character or characters are telling this collective story, right? Which is to say, every single character and every single piece of writing has a goal. If not, like if a certain character doesn't have a goal, then like there's kind of no plot. Audiences and readers kind of start to like ask themselves, like, okay, why am I reading this story if like this character doesn't want anything or if they're not conflicted by anything, right? Goals give plot. So what you should immediately be asking yourself when you are engaging with the character that you want to depict in your interp, you should be asking yourself, like, what is their goal? What do they want? And what are they doing throughout the script to try and get that, to try and get like or achieve their goal, right? So that these kind of questions really help you like whittle away at that question and get to like the core of what they want, what they're doing to get there, or what we call like tactics, the tactics that they use to get to their goal. And that will really motivate you and like help you better understand the script and like mark down stuff, right? Speaking of marking down, like what you guys are seeing on like the right hand of this slide is a screenshot from one of my old scripts, my junior year of college, so 2 years ago. This was my junior year of prose. It was this is from the cut that like I took to nationals my junior year, and this is just like the blank version of it, right? Like just the pure text. And I want to kind of show y'all like my process for like creating an environment. So this is how I mark up my script to help me better understand the character and the environment. So that's kind of like what the finished product looked like. Like this is what I took with me to nationals for understanding the environment and the blocking. Like all of this that you see right here are mostly just like blocking notes. I have like a separate doc that's all marked up for like acting notes, right? But I kind of want to let me kind of read through this slide, and then I kind of want us to like all discuss what this mess is over here. So start marking up your script, right? Like don't be afraid to get messy with the process. Don't be afraid to like make a copy of your script, print it out, or have like a digital copy of it, and just like go in on it. Just like mark up, highlight things, write on the side, annotate of like what you think is going on, stuff that you're confused by, stuff that you maybe want to do, right? I usually like to think of the script as like, I like to think that I'm a detective and the script is like my case file, right? And each line that the author writes for you is like a new clue on how you're going to perform this, on what this character is thinking, right? So write down your thoughts. Approach this process as if you are a detective. What you're doing and who you're talking to, annotate your script every time you get a clue, and let that guide you towards different blocking and environment choices, right? And this is my prose from 2023. So yeah, let's talk about it. All the highlights that I have here, so each different color highlight is a different focal point. So the orange highlights, I'm looking at Corey. The purple highlights, I look at the audience, right? Any circles are like different kind of like focal points or like different types of decisions. So here, with the blue highlight in the circle, I said look off past audience. So like kind of like offward here into like the void. This one right here for dumb jock, I kind of like look off to the side and chuckle, right? I kind of went through this with that like mentality that I'm a detective and the script is giving me clues, right? I didn't just like one day like wake up and I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, right? Like it requires a lot of like reading the script over and over again and taking like at a certain point almost taking the language literally, right? Like, for instance, I looked at Corey now. Well, if I looked at Corey, I'm gonna look at Corey in the performance, right? Stuff like that, right? Like having the language of the text really guide you to what types of images you want to create. Um, there's also like I really like this note here that I did for myself my junior year, where I'm like, wrist on the steering wheel, toothpick flicking around in his mouth, and I wrote, "I'm picturing a country boy. Let's give him a snapback trucker hat to round it out." Right? Like, I really like that as an example because I think it's really helpful for other interpreters to understand that author's intent is really important, right? The text is really, really important, and staying true to the text is really important. But at the end of the day, this is also interp, and you get to make it your own through a lot of the performance choices, right? And so, like, if you want to create an image of who you think your character is, or the people who your character interacts with throughout your interp is, feel free to like make up stuff for them, right? Like, feel free to say that, like, oh, like my character is wearing like a bandana, and maybe they don't have a septum ring, and maybe they have like a tattoo on their arm here, and right, like, get creative with it, have fun with it, right? um and I think the other thing too that really is helpful with that is, with every decision that you make, there should kind of be a little backstory that you give to it, right? So, like, going back to the tattoo, like, oh, I got a tattoo here, and the tattoo is a spaceship because I've always wanted to be an astronaut, right? Like, just stuff like that, where it's like, it gives a little bit of lore to your character. The more lore that you have for your character, the better, right? Because all of that, even though it's not explicitly said in the performance, it's subtext and it's work that you've done, and it's going to come through emotionally, trust me. um I kind of just want to ask, is there anything that like y'all have questions about here, or is there anything that y'all want me to explain about like this like little script analysis that I have? um I see I'm barely a half hour in, so like we can maybe like stop here and like kind of discuss and talk about things.
Can you explain the highlights again? Like why you went with each color?
Yeah. So the orange highlights are me looking at and talking to Corey, and the purple highlights are me looking at and talking to the audience. Especially because like it's prose, so like audience interaction and like in scene interaction is really, really important. Um, I actually really like that you bring that up, Rodrigo, because another way to really build environment. So I'm talking about environment in relation to blocking right now, but I think it's really, really important that we establish that like environment is not just blocking. It's not just a series of blocking choices. It can also be a series of focal choices, right? Like focal point choices, right? It can also be a series of emotional choices, right? Think about like think about nostalgia, right? Like when we feel really nostalgic, when we go to like um I don't know. Okay, let me just give an example from my life. My elementary school just got closed down, and I live like literally right across the street from there. So I feel really nostalgic whenever like I look at my elementary school in El Paso, because it kind of doesn't exist anymore. They're about to tear it down. The way that I engage with that space is it evokes a certain emotion in me, right? Like I kind of get sad whenever I look at that school now because it got closed down, right? Like that could be an emotional choice that helps out with the environment, right? If you have a scene change where you go to your mom's house and like you don't have a good relationship with your mom, that can be an environment choice that really like affects how you move throughout the space, right? Maybe you're like making a lot of like choices where you're like, I don't want to stay here too long, mom. I gotta go. Cause like you're not trying to start a fight with her, right? Like stuff like that. Like thinking about how like the actual physical space that you inhabit affects your emotion, right? How you move throughout it. And focal points also being a choice for environment. Maybe in an environment you have more than like two people in the scene, right? Maybe it's not just you and someone else. Maybe it's you and a group of like 3 people. So the way that you like talk to each one through your focal points is going to be equally as important to help the audience understand where you are, who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, right? So highlighting them in that color, in different colors, and then just saying like look at them is really helpful for me mentally, because it's like I don't want to get tripped up or be like, oh man, like who do I deliver this line to, right? um so yeah. Any other questions?
So you said that this highlighting or like this marking up this page is for blocking. So you mentioned nostalgia. Like, would that be if you're highlighting it for acting? Would you just like add key points to like, oh, when you're reading this line, think about this part of your life. So then you like, do that for that would like how would that look like for marking up a acting like script?
Yeah. So let's take like these lines here, just because I like the lean back in the passenger seat. Like sometimes Corey and I would go on miniature road trips, right? Here, I made a blocking note for me to like lean back as if like a passenger in a car, right? To really create that scene. But for the acting analysis, it looks a little bit different in the sense that like maybe here, like miniature road trips, I feel nostalgic about it. So like I if I remember correctly on this specific line in the script, I said like give a little bit of smile because you're happy about these memories, right? Like these memories, like you miss those days, right?
Yeah.
I think like that is a little bit of the difference. Like I like this type of blocking analysis pertains more to like the physical focal choices that I make, and script analysis would be more like the pauses that I take, or the emotional analysis is more like the pauses that I take, the times when I really like annotate to myself, and it's like take your time with this and think about like the time that y'all got in a fight and that y'all stopped being friends or whatever, right? Like it's more so like what emotions am I feeling, and I'm helping myself walk through a lot of that. I think I have something like that. Like chuckle at how embarrassing it is to admit that. That's a little bit of a combination of emotional and blocking, right? Because it's like me making like the acting choice of like um chuckling and then explaining like that's kind of embarrassing. Like that's why you did that, right? It's to kind of like shove off the awkwardness. But yeah, that's a little bit of the difference between those two. Emotional is a lot more based on intentional pauses, where you're going to pause, where you're going to inflect a little bit in the voice, when you're going to down speak in the voice. A lot that has to do with like the voice and the face.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right.
How would you?
Oh, fierce. Yeah, go for it.
How would you use all these notes and see how it actually looks like when you do block it? Like when you did put all this together on paper, how did you translate that to the actual performance?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So I would so this is like a digital copy. So I would usually like on my good notes, just like write all of this in. And then I would have like the script in front of me with all these annotations. And I would start off really slow. I would read it and just like little by little implement these notes. So like let's say I'm just gonna start at the top. Like I looked at Corey now, wrist on the steering wheel. Like if I said look at Corey here, I would practice that really slowly. I'd be like, I looked at Corey now, and then I'd go back and then I'd go to the next note, right? It's taking it note by note. Um, and then eventually when I feel like I more or less got a feel of it, I would stand up and try to perform all of it at once and I would record it. I think recording it is really important because when you play it back, you're able to see like that looked awkward. That didn't look good. Maybe let's go back and like rewrite something in there. Or like it's like, ooh, I like the way that looked, but I can clean it up more, you know? So I would say like have it in front of your face. Don't be afraid to like do a couple of run throughs with like you looking right at the script and taking in all these new notes because it's a lot. And just take it slow. Take it really, really slow. Record yourself so you know more or less what it looks like, or do it in front of the mirror. And from there, kind of go through and take out what you don't like, keep what you do. But that's how I would kind of implement it into performance until it becomes like muscle memory and you could just do it without thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. All right. Let's talk about how to perform environment continued. When you feel you're ready to perform your subtext and script work, keep these tips in mind to keep the performance fresh. Environment is not only about what you do in the space, but how you feel in the space, right? So when I talked about nostalgia and everything, environment is not only about, two focal points have a huge role in creating and maintaining environment. 3, creating different character mannerisms or tropes that affect how you engage with the space, right? So this goes more into like what I was talking about before about like character lore, right? If you get the idea or if you get the hint that like your character is really shy and nervous in the text of your script, then maybe like if you're at school, right? And you're at this school rally, you're at a pep rally, right? And your character doesn't really engage well with big spaces. It's okay to give them a little mannerism of like them like playing with their hands and being a little bit fidgety, them kind of looking around at the exits because they want to get out of here, right? Like let that kind of thing motivate you to make these really cool and unique choices and decisions that let the audience in a little bit about who this person is and why they're doing the things they're doing, right? For most pieces, environment is not only about how you engage with setting, but also who you share the setting with. So one of the biggest questions that me as a judge ask, especially in DI, this is a big DI one. One of the biggest questions that me and like other judges in the circuit ask when we watch inter pieces is, who are you talking to and why are you telling the story, right? There should be some kind of motivation for you even like starting the performance, right? And that is in relation to who you're talking to, right? Like if you're doing a DI and you're kind of just saying like, oh, it was March 4th, 2022. I walked outside and I got in a car accident, right? Like, cool, great, awesome, but like, why? Like, who are you telling this to and why, right? Think about like in real life when we tell people stories, like, think about why we tell them, what motivates us, right? I'm not going to go up to a random stranger on a Tuesday and tell them, like, oh, dude, like, I got in a car accident this one time. It was crazy. Like, you should hear about it, right? Like, there needs to be a little bit of establishment on who you're talking to and the relationship that you have with them. So that way, you even telling the story in the first place is justified. Like, if you are maybe like in this whole like car accident situation, the person that you are talking to is your insurance representative. And that's why you're telling the story in the first place, right? Is because your insurance representative needs to know what happened during the car accident, right? Just keep that in mind because we as judges really, really appreciate it when you take the time to establish like who you are sharing the space with in your environment. If you're talking to an interviewer, if you're talking to your best friend, even if you're talking to a complete stranger, it makes all of the difference when we as the audience know that because it puts us at ease. So much about performance, not only in inter, but in speech in general, so much about performance is about trust. Think about it, okay? If you are watching a final round at like a big tournament, let's say you're watching the final round at Harvard, right? You expect these pieces to be like really fierce, really good, like everything to be like almost perfect, right? If you go up there and you see one of the finalists give a memory flub, you kind of get dropped out. You're kind of like, whoa, what happened there, right? It's because that trust was broken. You trusted that person to be memorized. And when they weren't, you broke that trust. When you establish who your environment, you create and you build more trust with the audience, and they're more willing to sit back and just enjoy the performance rather than them being like, I don't know where you are. Think about the environment a little bit more. Who are you talking to? Right. These are some things to just kind of like keep in mind and think about when you are trying to perform and build your environment. All right. And then we're going to talk about consistency is key. We're going to watch another video. I will also just show the teaser of this one, just because we are running out of time a little bit. And then we'll get into questions. So this is Kimberly Lee and her 2022, her senior year DI. Okay.
Salt, pepper. Chiho, you are here to see me before I go. How could I forget? I am so nervous. I know I put together the American cleaning, the American music, Danny's favorite song. The living on a prayer. I am so nervous that I am practicing how to cook the American breakfast. The eggs, biscuit, potato, and the bacon. It's too salty. Okay, how do I look? Danny? Oh, Danny bought me this new lipstick from that shop by Anjongdi. I wanted to wear it tonight to surprise him at the club. I cannot wait! Oh, it is my last day. Next stop, America with Danny.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was Kimberly Lee's 2022 dramatic interpretation at the American Forensics Association National Speech Tournament for college. I should have mentioned. Yeah, I really quickly, I wasn't able to hear a lot of that. Were y'all able to hear that video?
It was like a little muffled, but I got like 80% of it.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I didn't even consider that when I uploaded the video. But either way, when I say consistency is key and I show that video, I really like how Kim does a really good job of being consistent with her blocking and really like almost like holding the audience's hand on like where she is and who she's talking to. She begins the piece by being like salt, getting the pepper, and then when like her friend comes in, she's like, "Oh, I'm making like the eggs, the potatoes." She opens the oven. She's like, "I'm making this." She closes the oven, right? Like it's about being aware of like everything affects everything, just as like if you're in real life, right? If I go and open the fridge, I can't just walk away and leave it open, right? Like I gotta close the fridge, right? If I finish eating something, I'm gonna put the plate in the sink and maybe wash the plate right then and there. I'm gonna put it in the dishwasher, or I'm gonna wash my hands after, right? And if I wash my hands, I'm gonna dry it, right? It's about being consistent and making everything sequential. So yeah, that being said, always aim for realism, right? You want your blocking and your environment to feel as natural as the emotional choices you're making. Thus, pay attention throughout how you move in your day-to-day, right? If you're doing a piece where you're at the supermarket, pay attention to the physical choices you make throughout the space. For instance, like I got a shopping cart here for as an example of like pay attention how much force you use to push a shopping cart, right? Like pay attention to like if you're pushing a wacky shopping cart, like how difficult it is to like turn it, right? Like pay attention to like how difficult it is to like take them out when they're like all in like the rows together. Think about like if you are in the frozen section or in like where they got like a bunch of fridge stuff, like frozen cold stuff, right? Are you cold when you walk through that aisle? Like, do you like shiver a little bit, right? Like, think about like when you're at the register to pay, you take out your wallet, you look through the money, or like you're looking for your debit card, and like, boom, you put in the chip, you tap the pin, right? Like, a lot of things to just like think about in how you move through your day to day. Log that in, kind of clock it a little bit, and use that throughout your performances. Interps that mirror real life or realism as closely as possible are interps that I think are like the most entertaining because we relate to it a lot more, right? If you're making a lot of physical and emotional choices that aren't believable, then the audience is kind of going to be dropped out a little bit because we don't relate to it, right? Even if we haven't experienced exactly what your character is experiencing, the emotions and the blocking could be palpable enough that we relate to it just because we've all felt happiness, we've all felt sadness, we've all felt anger, right? Like it's about being able to relate to your audience. And I think the most effective method for doing that is realism, either through your acting or through your blocking choices. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about anything that I talked throughout this presentation?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in POI, and I was wondering, how do I create separate environments for my different pieces I'm using?
Yeah, that's a really really good question. So I would. Oh, sorry, I just gotta. Okay, fierce. Okay, it told me like you stop sharing your screen, and I was like, yeah, I made that decision. Yeah, so what I used to do for POI is I used to take all of your characters, right? So like let's say like you got 4 characters in your speech, right? Um Environment isn't so much important for like your poetry characters because like that's more just so like blocking heavy, right? Like those are standalone movement choices to create images that supplement the language of the poetry, right? Poetry isn't so much rooted in creating a scene or like an environment as it is like painting individual pictures through language, right? So I would take like your non-poetry characters, right? And I would line up all the pages that you have with them, right? So if for a character, I have 4 pages in the POI from that character, I would put them all together and I would analyze it by like the slide that I showed about like the blocking analyzation. I would mark it up as if it were like a single script, right? You want to look at it holistically and you want to be like, oh, where is this character? What are they doing? How are they contributing to the POI? And how can I make the environment as effective as possible for the overall story of the POI, right? So, for example, let's talk about your POI. What character do you have in your POI?
I one of my characters is a old toxic masculine man, and him putting all his ideas on his younger son.
Okay, cool. So like I don't know a lot about the script, so like I'm just gonna start making stuff up about what the script, but like let's say like one of the toxic things that this guy does is that he yells at his kid like during when he plays sports, right? Like so you can have him literally like on the fence, like being like, no, you did that play wrong, blah 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 blah. And like maybe he has a hat and he gets a hat and he throws it down because he's so toxic and he's so angry, right? Like think about that type of thing, right? Like think about where you are. You're at a game and you're like, oh my God, like you messed that up. Think about like who he is and like the emotional choices that he makes and like what even like what is on his person and how that affects his choices, right? Like he can throw down the hat. Maybe he brought like a cooler and like he gets the cooler and he's so mad. He opens his water and he chugs it and he's just so angry, right? Like that type of thing, right? Um, think about like that's kind of how I would take it. Like take your characters one by one and then ask yourself where they are, who they're talking to, and then just like split the pages up after that and take it bit by bit through the POI. It's a little bit harder, but like, and I think physicality is also important for POI too. Like character distinction, you want to kind of change like the physical arrangement of each person. So like if this dude is older, maybe give him a little bit more slump in his shoulders. So that way, like when you immediately turn that page and you give the slump in the shoulders, the audience knows, this is the old toxic dude. We know where we are. I trust that he's going to stay in this scene that he painted for us.
No, good, thanks.
For sure. Any other questions?
I have a few questions.
Go for it.
Just for some engagement.
Yeah.
So like, how do you decide who you're talking to in like a DI or prose? Because I feel like, I mean, I don't do interp, but like whenever I watch interp, it's always like sometimes it just feels like they're talking to the audience, right? It's like
yeah,
I am doing a performance for the judge and this person. So
yeah,
like if in the cases where the script doesn't suggest who you're talking to, how do you make the decision of who you are talking to?
that's kind of like the funnest one. Like those kinds of scripts are the funnest because it gives you, it's like basically getting like a note from the author themselves being like, go crazy, do whatever you want here, because I did not specify who you're talking to, right? So I tried to make it like the most interesting situation, right? Like if I'm trying to think, did I even have something where the author didn't specify who I'm talking to? Nah, I kind of made it easy for myself. But you know, like it's like if let's say I'm doing a DI where I'm this kid who just graduated and I'm going through the college admission process, right? Like, and the author doesn't specify who I'm talking to, right? Like maybe the person that I'm talking to is like my college advisor. I always try to think about like who are the voices that we don't really hear a lot from that we maybe should, right? So like a college advisor or like maybe like a professor who I've been in contact with and like I know a little bit about and like I really see them as like a mentor, right? I would just like yeah, I would get a little bit creative with it and I would think about who is this person? Who do they want to talk to in this situation? Or if you want to get a little bit messy with it, who would make their goal a lot harder to achieve? Right. So, like, going back to like the college admissions thing, let's say like I had a really bad GPA and I want to make the conflict a little bit spicier, then maybe I'm talking to like a representative from the university saying that like I can't get in because my GPA was but you know like my GPA was bad. I'm not getting it like and that kind of drops us into like oh what is this person going to say to someone who just told them no? You know like thinking about stuff like that where it's like don't be afraid to get creative with it. Don't be afraid to get messy with it, right? Like that's the fun of interp is that y'all really get to like go in and bring your own pizzazz to it, right? But yeah, that was a good question. That was a good question.
Okay, I have one more if no one else has anything. And this might be helpful to everyone, but how do you usually like uh, so how do you usually like collaborate with other people to like workshop your piece? Like are there any drills that you do for to practice decision making or I don't know, like charades or something? I don't know.
Rodrigo, you got it, dude. Like you're asking the right questions. Like, okay, this is actually really, really helpful. Like, and I think like in interp, like, please bring this to y'all's teams, share this with everyone, right? Because I think this like has helped me phenomenally. Like it's pushed me miles ahead, in my intern journey. Let me tell a real quick story. One time I was in this here team room. I'm in the Texas speech team room right now. Okay. I was in this here team room 3 years ago, my sophomore year of college. And I could not figure out this DI to save my life. We were like 2 weeks away from nationals, mind you. Like, I could not figure out this DI to save my life. I wanted to cry. And we were just in the team room. It was me, and a couple of my friends on the team. And I was like, y'all, please help me out. I cannot figure out like what the environment is. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? They're like, okay, stand up in the front of the room, show us, right? And I open up the book, I start talking, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, one of my friends, Kevin, responds to me as if he's in the scene. And I respond to him as if like we're like this is like a duo now, right? It helped me really figure out a lot of my motivations and acting choices within the DI. One of the things that has truly helped me so much to build an environment in relation to speaking to another person in the audience or in the scene, go up to the person, right? If you're doing like a DI, if you're doing an HI, right? You have dialogue in there, right? So in between the lines, give like questions or like responses that you think the person you are talking to is asking you, and then go up to your teammate and tell them, read the things to me that I've written in between each line. So like if I like let's say like in my DI, I come home and my roommate asks me how was my day, write in how was your day with pen, and have your teammate ask you that, and see how you respond to them. It shouldn't be very like speechy, robotic, like I'm doing a DI, right? Like it should feel kind of natural, right? And you don't know how your teammate is going to say it. And so you got to respond based off of how they talk to you, right? That really just opens up your mind. And it's like an exercise in playing around with the ways that you say things for the performance. So that I think is a really good way of like breaking through like a funk and like better understanding like cooperation among teammates and like having them look at stuff. I would also just like, I think it's just super helpful if like you sit down with your friends and like you show them the performance and you get real with your girls, right? Like you're like, all right, did this make sense? Yes or no? And honesty is the best policy. Like you gotta, you gotta be real with them. Like you gotta be like, and we always used to say this on the team too. We used to be like, please do not feel bad in telling me that what I just did, you didn't understand it at all, that it was bad, you didn't like it, because I would rather have my teammates tell me that than a judge tell me that on the ballot. So like, it is really changing a lot of like how you approach your teammates. Like your teammates are there to tell you, like, I didn't get that. That really worked. You really need to keep that, or let's work on that. Or doing like the call and response exercises in interp where like you just kind of approach your script as a conversation. That will help you make like so many new tricks. It's really, I do it with my students on the team because I coach for the Texas speech team right now. I do it with them where like if they're talking to me in a DI, I'll respond and I'll see how they take it, because it's about the choices that you make when someone responds to you in the performance, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I would recommend. Like have your teammates talk to you as if it were a conversation in the script. See where that takes you.
I have a question about like blocking out poems and stuff because that's where I struggle more because there usually aren't environments and it's just more like word for word. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's kind of the same as like when you're like the detective and like you let the language like give you clues, right? Like if I am, let's say like, so my coach in college was trained in like Laban movement, Laban. You can look it up. It's basically like a form of like dance and movement that is connected to emotion. And there are 8 different types of movement, right? And usually the way that I would approach it is I would be like, oh, which Laban movement is this? And I would try to emulate that. But if you're not familiar with Laban, then I would just kind of like ask myself, like, what style of movement is it? Like, what do I picture? Is this a tense movement? Is this like a very free, fluid movement? Is this a pop movement? Right? Like, I like to think of blocking for poetry as music, since poetry is music. Poetry is rhythmic. Poetry has meter, right? Like, poetry is music is poetic, right? So think about like in music, there are staccatos, there are elongations. I don't quite remember the opposite of staccato, but you know, like there are like notes where you elongate it. There are stretches, there are short and sharp movements in the music, right? There are like fluid, there are parts in the music where you have to have everything flow together, right? So if you're doing a poem where like you're talking about a bird, right? Birds are very like they fly, right? So like they're free, they're fluid, right? Like I would try to like emulate the kind of movement that or I would try to emulate the images that the poetry is trying to create. Poetry is all about images, right? And I think like also like at the core of like this conversation, blocking an environment is all about images, right? We always say on the Texas speech team too, we should be able, like me as your teammate, should be able to go up to you during your performance and like take a picture of you doing whatever in your performance. And when we see those pictures, we should be able to be like, oh, I know what you're doing. Like I know what's going on here. Yeah, you know. So let the language guide you in that sense. If the language is very rough and the language is maybe angry and terse, then you want your blocking to be very tense and sharp and quick, right? If the language is very pretty and the language is um happy and fluid and more upbeat, then you want to maybe take your time with the movements and the images and you want to really indulge in that, right? That's how I would kind of approach that.
Kind of going off of that, poetry. Hi,
Hi,
poetry.
Josh. OMG.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you
Poetry is
too.
able to be interpreted like so many different ways. Whenever you read your poems, interpret them, see how it shows up to you, and try your best to recreate whatever that image looks like to you for the audience so that they can be on the same page with you about how you want to use that poem in your piece.
I would listen to Josh. He's one of my favorite poetry performers of all time.
Yay. Josh is the best. They're awesome.
Yeah. Is there any more questions?
I do have a question. Well, sort of, I would say. So I'm doing prose, right,
Okay.
for my speech, and the story is about this young man who is a pilot and kind of done some not so good things because he's kind of like cheating off his wife, and his wife is religious, like really religious. She's Christian, and then all of a sudden, like the people in the plane had like disappeared, and then basically some people have been left behind, and that's what the story is. I'm not a religious person. I'm an
Okay.
antithesis, so I don't know if like that story as an antithesis, like it would like affect my like actions or like feelings when I'm doing like the story for my prose.
Yeah. I mean, and this is like just like the T on being an actor, right? Like if you encounter like a character in your speech that has different beliefs than you, then you kind of that's where the script work really, really needs to come in effect because you're not performing yourself doing the character, you're kind of performing the character, right? So
Yeah.
you kind of want to read the script and you kind of want to like unearth the psychology of this character a little bit more. Why do they believe the things that they believe? What is motivating them to do that? Like you kind of want to put yourself in the shoes of that character a little bit so that way the choices feel a little bit more organic, right? So
Yes.
I think like script work is going to be super super important for your performance because you want to kind of want to take like a magnifying glass into this dude's brain. You want to like
Yeah.
think about the way that he thinks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't agree with it, like you kind of just want to understand it better so that way like when you make a choice, it would be a choice that he actually makes, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, go through it and like if you're confused on like anything that he does, like if he's praying and you're like, I don't get why he prays, right? Like then like mark that on the script. Like, why is he praying? Why now? You know, like what about the situation is motivating him to pray right now? You know, like, or if he's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, God bless, he's like, why God bless this? Why not God bless anything else? Right? Like, those are the types of clues and the questions that you want to ask within the script that will really inch you a little bit closer towards who this person is, how they think, why they think the way that they think. And that way you could tell the story a lot more organically.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm. All right. I'm going to take that as no one has any other questions.
Wait, I had a quick question.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask. So I have a prose character in my boy that is he's a, he's a sicario, he's a hitman,
Hmm.
and he's still, he talks a lot about how he was in the cartel and his experiences. So, for a boy, I know there's some people that go really fast paced, but is it okay to have those prose characters that sometimes just sit down and tell their stories, or does there always have to be blocking with those characters, especially in play?
Well, I think like the advantage that you have here in prose is that it's very narrative based. You're going to be narrating a
Yeah.
lot. So it kind of lends itself to not having a lot of blocking anyway, right? Um, so as long as I would say like you're good, like you don't have to have a lot of fast paced blocking imagery and stuff like that in prose, as long as you kind of
Or it would be in a POI.
oh, it's a POI.
Yeah, in a POI. It's just a drama piece in a POI.
Oh, okay. I got you. I thought you were like doing a standalone prose event. Okay, fierce. I mean, as long it's okay to have like this one character that like doesn't have a lot of environment, as long as the other characters in your POI do, if that makes sense. Like, and I
Oh,
think there
okay.
kind of should in a POI. I think there should be like one character that lets the audience breathe a little bit in terms of like we're not watching a lot of like boom, 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 right? Like maybe it's like boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. I turn the page, you're there, you're still, right? Because it plays a lot with levels and people love levels in a POI. Like people love to be on the edge of their seat. And then the next page, they're like, whew, okay, I get to breathe a little bit. I get to just kind of follow along the story before we get back on the roller coaster. You want it to feel like a roller coaster. So I think that's fine.
Okay. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one more question.
Okay.
So at my school, for like backstory, like we're an up and coming school, and we have like a new coach, and our coach doesn't really know too much. We're kind of learning with her.
Okay.
And so I don't have much of a community when it comes to doing interp, because the other people at my school do debate. And so it's like me and two other people, and those two other people, they're like newer.
Mm-hmm.
And so where can I find other people who will like, have the same mindset as me and have like ideas, whereas instead of me trying to teach other people?
Yeah. I think that's the tough part. I think it's really difficult because like I also came from like a really small program in high school where like especially in El Paso, like we were so isolated from every other part of Texas. So like we didn't have like a lot of resources or people that we could reach out to. I think like part of that is networking with like a lot of people on the circuit and like creating relationships and like friendships throughout the circuit so that way like you can maybe come up to them one day and you're like, hey, like can we have like a session where like we can FaceTime or like we Zoom and like I can show you this because I want that expertise from like other interpreters to kind of like see if what I'm doing looks good or not, right? um I would also like maybe like reach out to like some people at Space City, right? Like to see if like you can maybe do some private lessons with them too. Um, that's what I would suggest. I would also like low key, if you're comfortable, like I would also show the debaters on your team what you're working on, because we always say it on the team here at Texas too, like you want to, as interpreters, you want to show the people who only do extemp or the people who only do like limited prep your interp piece, because if you can get the person who knows nothing about interp to understand what you're doing in the scene, then you'll have everyone who does interp understand what you're doing in the scene because they already know what goes on in interp. So, you know, like if you're comfortable, go up to those debaters and be like, hey, watch this really quick. And then after like you finish like maybe the teaser or a part of like the climax or who knows what, ask them, what was I doing? And if they can't answer the images that you were trying to create or the scene that you were trying to set up, then you should workshop it again and you should make it a little bit more clear. If they do answer, if they're like, oh yeah, like you were at an auto shop, like we could totally tell you were trying to fix a car, then it's like, oh, fierce, I'm good then. Like it's clear. Like,
okay. Yeah. Thank you.
For sure.
I can also like answer this question. At like Space City Camp, we have a few different services. Like in May, before NSDA, we have like a mentorship program called the Cyclical Coaching Initiative. So we'll pair you with a college student that's going to nationals also, or like an alum or something, and you can meet with them weekly, and it's free. It's virtual, and yeah, basically just have those one-on-one coaching sessions. And these are people who are like very skilled and specialized in whatever event you're doing. We make sure to pair you that way. And like Fernie said, like every single month we have at least 3 different lecturers. If there's someone that really resonates with you, like I mean, reach out to the Space City Instagram or email us, and I mean, we can give you their contact information if they're comfortable with it. Yeah.
Cheers. You gotta love Space City.
All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Fernie, for this lecture. Seriously, what it was a very, very good workshop. I learned a lot. I don't even do interp. I learned so much. So it was great. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this. If you're sitting here wondering, oh, I didn't get everything. I wish I could watch this again. It's recorded and it's going to be uploaded on YouTube. And we'll throw that link on Instagram. It'll also be on our website. So you can watch this back, send it to your peoples, do what you need to do. But